Ole Miss, you got Penn State. Penn State favored by 4.5 points. Ole Miss, man, this is their chance to finish a 10-win season and add another one onto that to have an 11-win season. This would be the first New Year's Six Bowl win for Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, and I think it would further legitimize his way of doing things, man. And when I say his way of doing things, I'm not talking about the Twitter trolls, because I'm all about that too. I'm not just talking about, his dog juice. I'm all about that too. But the way that he's built this roster the last couple of years, going to the portal, taking the best available, up in the talent level, and winning with it. You win a New Year's Six Bowl against a team like Penn State, who's one of the top brands in the country. I think that would mean something. I think that would be, again, just some further legitimization, if that's a word that even exists, for Lane Kiffin and his operating status at Ole Miss. I love the fact that they gave him a new contract and just kept him in Oxford, because I think this does work. I think Ole Miss overall, regardless of this game, the way he does things does work. I think Lane Kiffin in Oxford does work, and this is a chance now to put some proof in the pudding and keep a good thing going. So that's a lot on the table there for Ole Miss. For Penn State, man, we talk about the way that they were viewed in the preseason. How much juice was there for them? This was the year they were going to take down Ohio State. This was the year they were going to take down Michigan. Unfortunately, neither of those came to fruition. But if you beat one of the top teams in the SEC from this past year, I think that kind of revitalizes what a lot of people thought and expected of them. And to be very clear now, Penn State, their window is not closed. Like, this wasn't the one year where Penn State had to get it done. A lot of the cats that were on this team are coming back. Now, obviously, you lose some key pieces in Chop Robinson and Olu Fashanu, but even so, man, like Drew Aller coming back, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Abdul Carter, the nucleus, as Charles Power, director of scouting and rankings, would refer to here at On 3, the nucleus of this core talent at Penn State is young, and they're coming back next year. So a chance to springboard in 2024 the right way, if you're a Nittany Lion fan. Listen, man, in a game like this, in every college football game, but in a game like this, especially if it's Penn State playing, it starts in the trenches. Offensively, for Penn State, it starts in the trenches. And a big part of that, not just feeding your best player in Nick Singleton and your other best player in Katron Allen, but taking some pressure off my guy, Drew Aller, man. Drew Aller, I think, is going to be really good in Happy Valley for a long time. I think next season will be an improvement from this past season. But we saw in person in Columbus, Ohio, when you put the game on number 15, there is a tendency for him to struggle a little bit. Ole Miss, they're good, not great against the run. Allowing 4 yards a carry, that's not phenomenal. If you're a Penn State fan, you're probably licking your chops just a little bit there. Big Hunter Norzad, Cornell alum, by the way, Hunter Norzad. Shout out to Hunter. They're going to try and make a teach tape out of this game against Ole Miss. And so for Ole Miss, I think the way they operate with Pete Golding, they're going to stay who they are and be aggressive. So if you're watching at home, I think it'll be a lot of blue jerseys, if they're wearing blue, a lot of blue helmets running up from that second level to try and add in and be aggressive against that run game. I think it'll be adding numbers to stop the run. I don't think it'll be our guys versus your guys. We're going to try and just have the shoving match up front. No, I think it's going to be linebackers adding in. Might see some safeties adding in. I think that's who Ole Miss wants to be and who they're going to be in this game to try and stop the run. But when that happens, you got to make sure you're solid in coverage on the back end. Because if you win one-on-one and you help Drew Aller out and get open, I think he's more than capable of delivering that football to you. So that's where the big plays happen, and that's what Ole Miss obviously cannot have happen. To the other side of that coin, though, whenever you dial up pressure, because I expect them to dial up pressure in the run game, but also in the pass game, if they get home and kind of rattle Drew Aller a little bit, as we say on this show, you kind of open Pandora's box. And when you rattle a quarterback and throw them off kilter a little bit, and they're kind of trying to play catch-up, not just from digesting the defense, but trying to play catch-up from a getting centered again emotionally or psychologically standpoint, things have a tendency to roll your way if you're Ole Miss in that situation. So the other thing I want to watch here now, can Ole Miss win consistently outside? When I say outside, clearly I'm talking about the wide receiver position. They need to be disciplined, does Penn State, with their eyes. So if you've watched Ole Miss this year, more likely than not, you've had a situation where there'll be a sweep motion across the formation with the wide receiver, and then you'll have Quinshon Judkins running back the other way, is typically how they've done it this year. What I'm trying to say here is they give you a lot of window dressing to where when you're watching them, you might see or might not see rather, where the ball is going. It might be a thing where you're watching Jackson Dart one way, and then Dayton Wade's going the other way, or Trey Harris going the other way, or Quinshon Judson's going the other way. It's hard to keep track of the football. If it's hard for us watching the broadcast to keep track of the football, think about how much more difficult it is to keep track of the football if you're a Penn State defender. And so when that happens, you need to be able to take advantage of Penn State being out of position, if they're out of position if you're Jackson Dart. But perhaps more importantly, it's going to be about playing the game in space. Okay, so I talked about winning at the wide receiver position on the outside in the pass game. It might be more important to win on the outside when they're running the football. I mean, having to block that second level and third level of that Penn State defense and allow for a little bit of an extra gap for your guy to get north and south who's carrying the ball if you're Ole Miss. Comes down to discipline with the eyes if you're Penn State. Comes down to tackling in space. You can do both those things. You keep yourself in it, and you give yourself a chance to let your offense kind of wear down that Ole Miss defense and run the football and kind of just play at least with a close game, if not a lead if you're Penn State. But if you have those big plays happen, if you get undisciplined, you lose track of the football, and they start to spin a little bit, does Ole Miss. At that point, I don't love what they have offensively to try and match scores or maybe even keep pace and catch an Ole Miss team if they get down by 10 points or so. That, to me, would worry me if I'm a Penn State fan. Drew Aller, again, I think he's good enough to win this game for you, but the key there is you have to equip him with the things around him, with the run game, with the protection, to give him all he needs to make it just about Drew Aller. Because if it's just about Drew Aller in this game, I think he's good enough, again, to throw the football downfield. But you have to win outside. If you're a wide receiver for Penn State, you have to run the football to take the pressure off of him. You have to protect him, to give him time to deliver the football. Like, that's all the things that go into my thought process when it comes to assessing number 15 for Penn State. Now, Jackson Dart, man, that cat's a different animal. He is going to be a different animal than anything that Penn State has seen defensively this year. Now, Penn State has one of the best defenses in the country, even with their opt-outs. But the way that Jackson Dart runs the football, he's got 7 rushing touchdowns on the season. He don't care, man, when he gets downhill. Some quarterbacks, you see them, slide or dive forward. Like Jackson Dart, he's content to run behind his pads and lay the lumber on you. That's how number 2 gets down. I expect no different in this game. How Penn State handles that schematically is the first part of that, and how they're able to meet him over and over again in the hole on top of what what Ole Miss does running the football. Like, I think that could be a little bit of a physicality matchup, and it's very rare we talk about a quarterback being a part of the game physically, but I think Jackson Dart is just that. He'll have to protect himself as well, but I'm just saying, Jackson Dart, this will be a different tempo than Penn State has ever seen when it comes to what he does running the football. At the end of the day, when it comes to our pick in this game, like there's just too many question marks for me around Penn State. Like Drew Aller, I talked about how good he is. I've seen him struggle in some big spots. The Ohio State game we saw in person. The Michigan game, they also struggled. What's going on with the offense schematically as they've since fired Mike Yurcich? Transitions at the defensive coordinator spot, like Chop Robinson opting out. There's so many pieces here where I'm just like, I wonder how that'll work out. And the more that I wonder about Penn State, the more that I feel confident in what Ole Miss does offensively and the way they're going to attack Penn State defensively. I think just the style of game this is going to be with Ole Miss scoring points and then applying pressure to Drew Aller, I think that's how they end up getting the better of them in this football game. I think Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin as well, they are going to, just empty the clip. If you got a trick play, you're not saving it for game 1 of next year. You're not saving it for the Egg Bowl next year. You're using it right now. You're dialing up the double pass. You're dialing up the halfback pass. You're dialing up the flea flicker. Like, whatever you got in the chamber, and Lane Kiffin, I promise you, he's got a few rounds in the chamber. You're letting it go. You're letting it fly, all right? So I like Ole Miss to win this game. I do think it's high entertainment value. I think it's a game worth watching if that's one of the things you're curious about for this matchup. Ole Miss 31, Penn State 25. So we think Ole Miss not just covers the 4.5. We think they win the game outright. So we'll take Ole Miss. And again, this is more juice for Lane Kiffin, no pun intended. Shout out to his dog. More juice for what he's doing on the recruiting trail. More juice to what he's doing in the transfer portal. And I think it further cements the proof that Lane Kiffin is a great fit at Ole Miss. And I understand his name's going to come up in a lot of other jobs going forward. But I like Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, and I don't see a reason why you would leave when you have everything you need to be successful. And this would be a proof of concept for success for his time so far at Oxford. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.